Welcome to CC Writes. My name is CC Lepke, and today we're learning to use repetition in your writing. Welcome to CC Writes. My name is CC Lepke, and today we're learning to use repetition in your writing. Welcome to CC Writes. My name is CC Lepke, and today we're learning to use repetition in your writing. We're learning to use repetition in your writing. Repetition in your writing. In your writing. Your writing. Your writing. Seriously though, repetition of phrases, elements, and ideas in your story can help emphasize your themes and elevate your prose. Repetition in art is the recurrence of line, shape, pattern, or other visual elements. In writing, we can extend repetition to words and ideas as well. We use repetition for the sake of emphasis, to establish themes, and to create rhythm within the work. Yeah, kind of like that, I guess. There are a few different ways to create repetition in your work. There's alliteration, direct quotation, indirect reference, rhyme, and mirroring, among other things. Repetition can take on a lot of different forms in your prose, and it uses many of the previous fundamental arts that we've talked about during this series. Repetition is a great example of why it's so important to grasp all of the fundamentals of prose. It's basically the megazord of prose. If you don't understand all of the underlying principles that make writing beautiful, then you won't be able to use repetition to its fullest. If you haven't already seen the rest of the videos in this series, then I highly recommend going back to the very beginning so that you can get a better appreciation of what we're going to be talking about today. As with all of the fundamentals of prose, repetition should be used carefully. Just because you have a new tool does not mean that you should use it for everything. Prose should be clear, concise, and purposeful in its usage. But if you're not careful, repetition can undercut that rule and make your writing annoyingly redundant. Like your little sibling and their incessant questions about why the sky is blue. It's blue because nobody likes you, Steve. We want our prose to look more like a callback from a really great stand-up routine. We want our prose to feel like poetic justice, that perfect moment when the protagonist claps back at the villain using a snide comment the villain made earlier in the story. We want our prose to sound hypnotic and enticing to our readers, so we have to be precise. There's a time and a place for everything, including repetition in prose. There are actually 3 places for repetition in your story: within paragraphs, within chapters, and within the overarching plot of the story. I know, it's obvious that repetition is going to happen all throughout the story, but there are different tools to use in those different circumstances. Unless you're the doctor, in which case you can just use the sonic screwdriver for everything. As I mentioned earlier, repetition is for emphasis, themes, and rhythm. Rhythm typically happens on the paragraph level. Emphasis can happen within paragraphs or chapters, and themes occur at every level: paragraph, chapter, and story. There are certain circumstances where you want to include rhythm in your work, and other circumstances where you absolutely do not want it. Rhythm can be hypnotic. It can feel like driving on the highway at night, those times when it's just you, the darkness, and the low hum of your engine lulling you into a state of relaxation. Suddenly you blink and you're already home with no idea how you got there. Rhythm should be used when you want to lull your audience into a sense of security. It can be used to represent the character's dissociation. I like to use it to highlight jarring moments in my story where the rhythm is broken and the thing that breaks it seems so much more discordant in comparison. It's a precursor to fear, surprise, and danger. It's also a tool that you can use for emphasis and theme. In school, we were taught that repetition is the basis of all learning. Repetition and rhythm on the line and paragraph level can actually lock an idea into your audience's head. It's like subliminal messaging. You can use rhythm to establish a connection between 2 things or ideas that will carry your reader through the rest of the story. We use emphasis only in those situations where there is something vitally important that the audience must know about the character, the world, or the themes. Think Chekhov's gun. You want the audience to know that the gun is there for when it comes into play later on in the story. But you always have to strike a balance when it comes to emphasis. Don't make the assumption that your reader isn't going to understand your point unless you repeat it 30 times. I recommend the rule of 3. Most people will understand that something is important if you bring it up 3 times. How you use rhythm and emphasis can actually indicate the theme of the book overall. Because the story uses repetition to create callbacks and bring back ideas from earlier in the book, the repetition of these elements creates an overarching theme for your story. Let me show you what I mean using my own book, Fine. The carpet scraped against my cheek. I laid on the ground in the dim twilight that peeked through the window of my bedroom. Up on the nightstand, the alarm clock cast a steady glow of green into the shadows, but didn't lift the darkness. Inches from my face was a dead roly-poly, with its many legs caught in the fibers of the carpet and holding it to the floor like a Velcro pad. The bug didn't look like it had ever been alive, with its gray-blue body faded and brittle. It could have been an old bug. Maybe it lived a good long life with a bug wife and a billion bug kids. Or maybe it got caught in the carpet and died alone before it ever had a chance to make something of itself. Stupid bug. My alarm was going to go off soon. I scraped my nose against the carpet again and hid my face from the scant light. If I stayed on the floor, would I die like the roly-poly? Would someone find me on the floor of my room, gray and brittle, as if I was never alive at all? My main character spends a lot of time thinking about the dead bug that she finds on the carpet. In the paragraphs talking about the insect, she keeps using the word bug over and over. Not only that, but she also keeps using words like dead, die, death, alive, and life in reference to the bug. This process of talking about the life and death of the bug creates a pattern within the chapter. It lulls the reader into a dreamlike state with an undercurrent of darkness that matches the main character's sleepy state of mind. Rhythm, in this sense, help establish a mood and a mindset. And this is very important later on when it comes to the theme of the story. I also used emphasis to create a secondary idea that also links to the theme of the book. The entire story is titled after the most common element of repetition that I used throughout the book. Whenever someone asked how the main character was doing, she repeatedly told them, "I'm fine," despite clearly not being fine. This interaction happened 32 times throughout the course of the story. I wasn't emphasizing the word fine, though. I was emphasizing the main character's inability to verbalize the pain that she was experiencing as a result of her depression. This is an example of emphasizing an idea across chapters. It's also an element that, combined with the rhythm that I used earlier, creates a dark and insistent theme throughout the story. In the first few paragraphs, the main character repeatedly talked about the bug. At the end of that section, she compares the bug to herself. I used rhythm to suddenly attach the idea of death to the main character from the very first page. Later, as she's continuously telling everyone she's fine despite a clear pattern of dangerous behavior, the concept of death and the imagery of the dead bug on the carpet follows along behind her like a dark promise. Using paragraph-level rhythm and the emphasis of callback throughout the story, I created a dark theme that overshadowed the actors and lingered at the back of my readers' minds throughout the story. If you'd like to get really good at repetition, there's no better way than redlining the work of a master. Get a spare copy of your favorite book and bust out some highlighters. Highlight a chapter on the line level to see what words or ideas are repeated. Sometimes writers start multiple sentences with the same word or phrase, so make sure you highlight those as well. You'll get a good picture of the rhythm of the writing and have a better understanding of when and where to use rhythm in your story. Next, use a different color highlighter and go through the story chapter by chapter. Identify phrases and ideas that are used as a callback in the work. Take note of how they're used and try to discern the purpose. Once you're done highlighting, take a look at the rhythm and emphasis you've highlighted in the story and see if you can identify the themes. What was the writer trying to say? What did they think was most important about the story? Did the theme have a satisfying callback in the end? You'll learn a lot about how to effectively tell a story through the redlining process. Of course, you can't improve your own writing only through redlining. You need to practice as much as you can so that you can make the fundamentals of prose second nature. I recommend practicing writing rhythm by making lists. Write a list about your favorite movies and include a single sentence on why each movie is your favorite. The first time you write the list, start each list item with the same word or phrase. The second time you write it, vary the first part of each sentence so that none of the sentences starts with the same word or phrase. To practice emphasis, write a paragraph or two about something that you remember fondly. Pick an element from your paragraph and use repetition to emphasize it. You can repeat the word multiple times and connect it to a feeling or an idea. You can return to the element multiple times to highlight something new about it. Just use whatever tool that you need to make it stand out in your paragraphs. Theme is a little bit more difficult to practice, but not impossible. Write a short story between 1,000 and 2,000 words. In your first paragraph, use rhythm to establish a connection between ideas. Call back to that idea 2 more times throughout your story to create emphasis. Finally, take that idea to its natural conclusion at the end of your story. It won't be easy at first, but the more you practice, the better you'll get. And that's it, the end of this series on how to use the basic principles of art to write good prose. Make sure you keep practicing and you keep reading other people's work so that you can see what good prose looks like in action. If you enjoyed the lesson on using repetition to create beautiful writing and want more writing lessons from me, click on the top video about how to write emotion into your stories. Otherwise, check out the bottom video that YouTube recommends. As always, thank you so much for joining me today on CC Writes, and I will see you later.